what I'll actually go through is not so much an ID in the way we've been talking about it in traceability, but more how can producers use sort of new technology that includes ID to sort of further the things that they want to do from a management perspective, but really how can we generate more actionable data? How can we identify disease early? How can we maximize sort of animal well-being and welfare issues and be producer-driven from that perspective? And then how can we look at selective treatment? And the interesting thing is that, you know, this technology may be new to some of you, but I think the key thing on this slide is there's 800,000 tags sold each year now from our company. You can double that probably when you think about other companies. And what I'm going to speak about is actually its use with dairy animals. And it is something that's used in a lot of dairy herds. So this is a map of just the users in our technology. They range from 30 tags to 12,000 in each of these stick pins. So, you know, Dr. Jeff Bewley from University of Kentucky probably speaks in the most different panels about, you know, cow intelligence and cow monitoring. And he talks a lot about the things on the left and catching cows early, and I'll show some examples of that, finding and treating cows, you know, understanding sort of feed intake and rumination and health and how that incorporates things. But, you know, we have more and more pressure on, from an economic situation, lower prices. How can we use technology to, you know, take the place of maybe lower trained workers? How can we advance, you know, production and health of animals? And that includes animal well-being, which is one of the big consumer demands, certainly environmental pressures of making animals more efficient, labor challenges, which everybody's facing more today, and then, you know, the pressures of economic competition. Just to give you a little bit of background about, you know, how does the system look if we were going in a dairy, and what I'll try to describe is, you know, how the systems are in place, some examples, a little bit of research, and then maybe a case study on how people are using it. But look at the collar or a tag as the monitoring device. It's the data collection unit. And then basically you have some type of BUs or an antenna. In our case, basically one antenna will go and read at least 1,500 feet forward, 300 to 400 feet from each side to side, a little bit backwards. So in this situation, you could have multiple barns. You could have the milking system in between. You could stall read with, you know, near field communication or IR essentially, and then you'd have a PC or some type of terminal. So we've got both. Sometimes people are putting a PC in their office and working from that. I'll have some examples. Sometimes they're putting a winterized, you know, computer terminal type thing, computer in a box processor, but it just flash on the wall when there's some actionable data to be done in that situation. And then usually if that's interconnected to the internet, that data would be taken up to the cloud, and then it could be pulled down by any other group that you'd want to interface with. Dairy management software, come back down to your cell phone in an application or your iPad, depending upon how you want to look at it. So, you know, that's a good overview of the layout. Okay, what does it look like from a dairy cow perspective? And this is just an example of each cow first is baseline to her own behavior. Cows are incredible creatures of habit when left to their own devices or to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And in this case, sort of we've got activity and rumination from a statistical. You look on the far side, you've got sort of 0, that's sort of this cow's baseline. On this side, you've got the number of rumination minutes, and at 600, sort of that purple or colored is. And if you look from the dry cow perspective, that purple line is really pretty steady all the way until calving time. Baby carriage, we use visuals a lot. A pen change, that's what the arrows mean. It's very normal for an animal to go down half of their rumination minutes the day they calve. So it's somewhat of a predictor of calving, although 20% of cows ruminate right through calving. It bothers them that little. But usually you'll have a 20% increase based on some health and research we have that how quickly that rumination minutes increase and is a big indicator of different disease. for early lactation. So this animal is what we're actually looking for in a healthy animal. And then from a reproductive standpoint, we can look at the same thing from an activity standpoint, but rumination also helps from a heat detection standpoint and having a real heat or real estrus. So what we'll see here is purple line decreasing for rumination on day of heat, and the green line is activity. And again, baseline from the animal's normal behavior. That shading where the 21 days is, that's 3 standard deviations different from their normal behavior. So you can see how far of increase that is and how distinctive it is when an animal is in heat. Okay, so what have we learned? There's sort of a few key periods, and we've learned now from several and even published research trials that if you have inconsistent rumination during the dry cow period, you'll have more inconsistent rumination, more health issues after calving with groups. So dry period, extremely important. Health at calving time, having that dip, having them come back up. Early lactation, can we keep that steady? We'll see some more examples. Then heat detection, can we get them bred back? Start the process over again. Of course, there's a number of alerts along the way. If an animal will abort, we see unusual behavior, those would come up as alerts. And then we've also have a lot of data now, and the next 2 slides will be data from 5 herds, all greater than 1,000 animals, looking at fresh cow issues, and not the amount of rumination minutes per day, but do they stay constant? So if you look at the Y, it's the prevalence of a disease, but the X is the rumination variability, which is 0% variability or 15% to 30%. So we'll look at why that's sort of a key part later on. We set the variability at 15% off normal when we start alerting on issues. But what it shows is that we've got subclinical ketosis is the more variability in rumination, a linear effect in increased subclinical ketosis. On the right is subclinical hypocalcemia. Again, more variability of rumination, very closely correlated with issues with hypocalcemia. Dead on arrivals, and these are dry cow issues. These are prepartum rumination issues and inconsistencies. So the increase in dead on arrivals and the decrease in milk production with more variability of rumination. So very closely tied to a number of health issues that are important to dairies today. Again, the graph to the far side, very similar to what we looked at earlier, what we're looking for. And in the right, a cow that had some issues during the dry cow period and inconsistent rumination, and then the inconsistencies that you would see after calving. So you lay this on top, and there'll be a couple slides later on treatments, and then you can also see what's the result of your treatment. Very quickly and nearly immediate. I want to show just also a couple slides from a long-range project with Cornell. You'll see some with Cornell, some with Minor Institute. We've worked with both. And basically, how good is the system at identifying health issues early in animals? And basically what they did is took a large commercial herd, hung the devices on the animal, did not allow the people in the dairy to see anything that was being generated by there, and to see how it compared in identifying things to a crew that was on the dairy that did the 10-day, basically, they took the temperature of all fresh animals, they did all the 10-day typical protocols. So 28 days before calving, basically they were looking and took part in all the different mastitis and DAs and indigestion ketosis. And they also had on that, which we'll show on the next slide, is they took NIFAs, BHBAs, blood calcium, haptoglobin, so they had blood information on this also. And then they compared it to basically our main stock health index report, which on the right basically shows that we start bringing animals on a health report when they're 15% off of normal rumination and health combined. And so that's 85. And then the lower they are off 100%, the further we get them up the list, and we start color coding. So the reds are cows that are likely to be clinical. If you don't catch those cows right away, they're going to be in in heavy risk for even greater problems or potential death. So basically, they were evaluating that ability, and this is what they found, and this was just being published in the next issue of the Journal of Dairy Science. In DAs, it was 98%, but the next column is the number of days that the system or electronic monitoring could find it before the crew on the dairy that worked with the fresh cows and did the 10-day body temperatures and everything. So it was 2.3 to 3.7, or a 3-day average. It picked up DAs before a crew on a dairy could. 1.5 advance on ketosis. Indigestion, a half a day, 2.1 days ahead. So early indication, early treatment, less duration of activity. And I think I'm just going to talk about maybe the results versus trying to dig into the specific data, and be glad to look at that if anybody wants to look. But basically it's showing the NIFAs, the BHBAs, the blood calcium, and the haptoglobin in the animals that were identified as sick by the crew, animals that were identified sick by the system, and then the ones that were listed as healthy. And basically what it's showing is that the healthy animals, they're clearly different in each of the blood parameters. But the ones that were picked up by the system were always blood parameter problem, but the people ones that were picked up but the system did not pick up looked more like healthy animals. So one is a little bit of indication of potential of overtreatment based on the blood parameter data. And also when the mastitis information looks like it could be a potential way, rumination and health monitoring, to selectively treat for things like mastitis, where there's not a systematic issue with the cow, that she'll work her way through it. So I think we have, technology will allow us to probably reduce antibiotic use by selectively treatment by indicators that we can pick up with monitors. So basically the study in final was the accuracy and specificity was 95 and 97%, incredibly good. The portal information that a customer would be looking at from a day-to-day basis can be tailored. There's several different areas. Any of the little boxes can be clicked in. Some of those could be set up as a separate portal. Up above you see milk, maintenance, rumination. That could be veterinarian, that could be nutritionist on the next two tabs, and they could each have their list of reports that they would normally look at. I think, from a feeding perspective, nutritionists are looking at this information more and more because there's a 4-hour lag typically to a feed change or a feed issue or moldy feed or toxins to when it'll show up on rumination. So it's nearly immediate when they start looking at a milk production standpoint. It's usually 2, 3, 4 days later when you see that impact. And the high correlation to lying down. So again, cow comfort. Overcrowded herds, we see ruminate less, more inconsistencies in rumination. And this is a little difficult to see, but this will go to show the incredible pattern of a dairy cow from day to day when left to their own. So this is basically midnight to midnight. This is one of the reports that we look at. Are things happening on the dairy with the animals on a consistent basis that day? And basically it's showing at the time of the day. So we got midnight on the far left, and we have again coming up on the end of the day on my side. The dark line is what is today. The line behind that's the 2-week average, and the white line is the variation. And on high production herds, we see that white line as being very narrow. The cows will do the same thing at the same time. Where we see the rumination spikes, so the middle one where the arrow is speaking to, that's right after milking and then feeding. So rumination was down at milking time. They were eating, so they weren't ruminating. Right after that, they got to lie down. If they didn't get to lie down because somebody forgot to open the pen, somebody forgot to unlock the headlocks, it's very clear. The line's going to be off the average. It's going to show up on an alert on the dairy for somebody. And I've got a couple examples of that. So feeding delayed in this situation, that took that purple line way off. And you can see on the big white line, the big white difference here to this side, they do all their protocols and shots at that time of the day. So it shows how much different or disruptive it is. But again, we could have examples where that white was incredibly narrow, and typically they're higher producing herds with less incidence of disease at that point in time. So again, you can see the narrowness to the far when there's very little in variation of what their activity is. On herds like a robot herd, you typically see very little variation because they're not on lockup. They go and milk when they want to milk. They'll develop their pattern of where they milk with other animals, and that white line or difference from week to week is almost, is incredibly narrow. Example of a rumination by pen. So this is a herd with nearly 5,000 animals. It's pretty steady other than a light blue line. That's the dry-off group. I often ask groups and people say, oh, that's the fresh group, or, that's the close-up group, but it's the dry-off group. And the dry-off group in this situation has incredibly dips and increases because many dairies are drying off cows at 80 to 100 pounds per day because of high production. They're often doing a vaccination at that time, sometimes a foot trim. And this dairy, when they saw that, started to decouple their foot trim and their vaccination from their dry-off to create sort of less interruption to the cow, and have seen less issues. And I'll show an example of that also. And just sort of showing at the Precision Conference last year in Minnesota, Tony Lauder from California presented, and I'm just going to use a few of his slides because I think it shows a better example about what you would put in and how you would do it. So this is an overhead of his operation where the PC is on the far side. Just 2 long-range antennas for all the animals. And we have no requirement for number of antennas. It's just space or geography on the number of antennas. So we've got one that we have 5,000 in where we have 4 antennas. So they're on one pole. One is facing out one direction, one's facing the other direction. The tags check in about every 20 minutes. And we have them pre-programmed to check in about every 20 minutes because that'll still give us up-to-date information, but extend battery life rather than doing it every minute, for example. So that's how small the equipment is, the size of the operation, and how it could be done. The reason for Tony purchasing is that he wanted to optimize dry cow performance, fresh cow management thereby, and increase pregnancy rate. And he wanted to see, were the treatments he was using working? Could he try something different? If he learned earlier, could he use a probiotic first before they got too bad to see if that would pop them out of whatever they had, and then look more at feed management. So and this is one of the situations where he changed how he moved animals off also. So he used to move animals from the far-off group to the close-up group once a week, give a vaccination at that same time, and at that point he was getting 25 to 30% of his cows were presenting sort of different kind of issues, including retained placentas. After the system he started generating 2 lists of cows to work. He started vaccinating earlier and then moving the cows and only moving the cows at that point in time. He saw an immediate impact in retained placenta decreases from that move. So that's just one example of people using it from a practical standpoint. I wanted to show also is most people now are monitoring from an ongoing basis during the day. They'll go and look at things once a day on the PC, maybe generate some specific reports, but they're monitoring things from their phone. So this is the phone app that goes along with it. In the red box is actually the health report, and you can look at 2 things from the health report. Are about the same amount of cows on that every day? Because that's what you'd expect. If that number's way up, something happened on my dairy. Do I know what it was? So it's an easy indicator right away about, okay, are things the same on my dairy today as they are any other time? And they can be at a meeting, they can be sitting in a meeting. A lot of them travel quite a bit, so it's a very easy way. And they talk about when I call back to the dairy operation now, I don't say how things are going. I'd say, hey, what's happening in group 6? Or, what's the scoop with animal 2532? Next to that is the number of cows in heat. Below the red box, far below is the rumination minutes today on the whole herd. And the darkened part is the 2-week average, so once again you can see, are things the same? And if they aren't, sort of why. You can pop into those, look at the individual animals. You can have a look up at it. If you're walking the pens, you can look up any individual animal, look at both their rumination and their activity, and create some lists off of that. So in closing, I think, what are producers seeing, and why have they gained benefits? Because they can look specifically at the animals that need help rather than do a look at each animal from a health aspect, much lower lockup time, and they're gaining big benefits from that. Choices now to reduce hormonal drug use. So they can try different things because of early indication and make it their choice rather than feeling like they're having to run programs that are more extensive. Selective treatment, reduced death loss and DAs from early indication, that's been shown. Options for greater success. Alerts anytime anything is out of the unusual, and peace of mind. You have a view of your herd and what's going on anytime from a standpoint of your phone. It can be extended into sort gates and milking systems automatically, so we can have data more in one place. And again, sort gates can run off of any preset conditions. So if you set a vaccination list in, or if you set any animal with activity of this much lower or any health issue of this, they'll be sorted automatically. And just want to end with a little bit of looking in the future. What are you going to see? What are you going to see in additional species? Because I talked mainly about dairy. We have some now on beef animals, and looking at it from a perspective of research and our algorithms and further tuning, but that's looking very good. So dual readers, we'll have a dual reader soon that will read our device and an RFID. Stick reader. More species, more devices, more different form factors. We all have a lot of different research on that to make it even more conducive to different animals, keeping them on animals, longer lasting. Early calving devices. So we have some indicators now, but a lot of people are working on that. Algorithm tuning and self-learning has sped up the ability to do things with animal monitoring. Better camera technology, you'll see, for body condition scoring in some cases. Location, everybody's working on that. If you're looking at just location, that's not too difficult, but if you want to do a number of other things also, you need to plug the cow in, essentially. So you think of GPS, we always know where we're at, but we charge our phone every night, so it's more of a battery issue than anything else. And more phone alerts with groups and pen issues and readers. So a quick look at animal monitoring.